world is flat. At least that's what people used to believe. The scholars, the most clever people in the world believed that the world was in fact flat. And if you sailed to a certain point, you were going to fall off the planet of the Earth and die. It wasn't, of course, there were some very clever Greek people who had figured this out early on, but there was actually never anyone who had tested it until in 1519, and two guys were crazy enough to set out and try it out for themselves. They jumped in their boat and they sailed out and realized that in fact the world was round. They didn't know more than other people. They weren't more educated than other people. Their boat was not more special than other people's boats. They just went and did it. We live in the most informed and technologically advanced generation ever. Does anyone here have a smartphone? Not just an iPhone, but a smartphone in your pocket? Anyone? Do you know that there is more computer power in that phone than was used to send a group of people to the planet of the moon, which is not a planet, but to the moon 45 years ago? More computer power in your pocket than was used for that. And yet we seem to be using all this computer power mainly to check what our friends had for lunch on social media. We get bombarded every single day with so much information, so many needs and so many problems. We watch TV and we see need in our ads of starving children, of poverty, of people in need, of wars and destruction. We can be so overwhelmed by all this information that we can become immune or indifferent to the need in our world today. We know so much, but we don't always know what to do with what we know. 7 years ago, I had never heard of human trafficking before. I grew up in Denmark, and injustice was not really part of my vocabulary. I mean, I grew up in a good home. It was safe. I had a good life. We weren't rich. We weren't poor. We just had a decent life. And I would say that the biggest form of injustice I experienced growing up was that I had to be in bed by 9 p.m. or that I was not allowed to watch a scary movie. I mean, it's just not fair. Injustice is often not part of our world, and we are so shielded from evil. That was until someone actually sat me down and told me about slavery. Yeah, I'm talking about slavery. Like the slavery that we heard about in our history class, maybe that happened 200 years ago. 12 million slaves were shipped from their home country of Africa and moved to another country to be exploited by the more privileged. We may think that this was ended. It was over. This is a poster from back then. It was a campaign poster to abolish slavery. We often say we abolished slavery 200 years ago. But to abolish something means to end it, means to eradicate it or annihilate it, extermination. It means to make an end to something. Reality is that slavery is bigger than ever before. So all we really did back then was to make slavery illegal. But slavery still exists today. In fact, there are more slaves today than there has ever been in any point in history. 30 million people are believed to be right now in slavery around the world. That is more than ever before. And yet only of those 30 million, 1% are rescued. And of the 1% that gets rescued, up to 80% of them are trafficked again, are sold again. This is 800,000 people a year, or 2 people every minute. Human trafficking is real. And that is what we call slavery today, human trafficking. Right now, there are people that are being exploited to sew our clothes, to pick our fruit, or to meet the demand for prostitution. Human traffickers prey on the most vulnerable people in our society. They pick the ones that are the most desperate, the ones that are poor, are the ones that has no security. They threat them, they beat them, they pressure them until they do exactly what they're asked to do. They have no choice and no way out. One of these slaves was Katja. She grew up just 3 hours drive from where we are today, in a small village in Bulgaria, with her dad and her mom and her sister. She grew up in a nice home. They didn't have much, but they were okay. Her dad was working and provided for them financially every day. That was until her dad got diagnosed with cancer. And suddenly the financial pressure was on Katja and her mom to provide for the family. So Katja had heard that there was jobs in Greece, and she told us how she walked to Greece. When she arrived here, she didn't know anyone, she didn't speak the language, but somehow she managed to get a job in a restaurant. In the first 2 weeks, her boss there was very nice to her. But after 2 weeks, he brought her upstairs upstairs on the restaurant. He locked her in a room, and he raped her for the first time. And he told her, "I own you. And if you ever want to see your family again, you better do exactly what I told you to." Then he started bringing men to her, and he forced her to have sex with them every day, every hour, day after day. She was trapped. She had no way out. He took away her mobile phone, all connections to her family and friends. She could do nothing. The more she fought against what they were doing to her, the more they would beat her, the more they would threat her. One day, she was so beaten that they were forced to take her to the hospital. This ended up being her rescue because the doctors found out what was going on and called the police. And she was rescued out of this situation. Katja is just one of millions of slaves, and she is just one of that 1% that actually gets to be rescued and come out. Human trafficking is huge. It is a growing crime. It is actually the fastest growing organized crime in the world today. It has surpassed the selling of illegal drugs in the world. It makes it one of the most profitable illegal businesses in the world today. Human trafficking is exactly that, a business. If you wanted to start a coffee shop, you need two things. You need to find people who like coffee, which is very difficult here. And then you need to find a supply of coffee. And then you have a business plan. The same thing is for human trafficking. There are two elements that drives this crime forward. It is supply, which is vulnerable people. People who are desperate for a new life or a better opportunity. There is also a demand. And the demand is us. We are the ones who create a demand for cheap labor. We are the ones who create a demand for sex, for pornography, for cheap clothes. We create the demand that drives this crime. This crime generates $39 billion a year, or about 31 billion euros. You know, you can sell a gun once, but you can sell a person again and again and again and again. There was a human trafficker who was asked, "Why do you sell people instead of selling drugs or weapons?" And he sat back very arrogantly and answered, "I sell people for the simple reason that the goods are cheaper than a Kalashnikov or a kilo of heroin. I'm in less danger if I sell a person than if I sold guns or drugs. And the goods can move themselves. You kick them and they walk." In many ways, human trafficking has become the perfect crime. It is high profit and low risk. Human trafficking conviction rates, people who get sentenced to jail for the crime, is 1 in 100,000 people. Let's say every person in Thessaloniki was a human trafficker, a city of about 1 million people. 10 people would go to jail for that crime. 1 in 100,000. When the founders of A21, the organization that I work for, sat me down and told me about human trafficking, I was shocked. I was stunned. I don't know how you feel when you hear this information, but it made me very angry. It made me angry that this was going on in my country. It made me angry that it was happening all over the world. And what made me even more angry is that I didn't know this. How could I not know that this was going on? I mean, I was educated. I was reading the news. I checked my Facebook every day. And yet I didn't know that human trafficking was happening. I didn't know these statistics. And then I got upset because what could I do about it? This sounds so huge. What could we ever do to change this? It's hidden in darkness. We can't always see it. It's right around us. And then I realized something. I realized that it might as well have been me who had been trafficked. You see, I did not choose to grow up in Denmark. I didn't choose my parents. I didn't deserve in any way to grow up in a nice home. I did nothing to deserve never to be abused or hurt. In the same way, Katja had nothing to do with growing up in her village. She had nothing, it was not her fault that her dad got sick with cancer and then she was forced to work. She made the best decisions with what she knew to support her own family. And then she ends up trafficked. I have found in that way that freedom and slavery has something in common. Both of them are undeserved. My cause to fight slavery is that I have freedom. My reason to do this is that I am free. Now, what will I do with my freedom? What will I do with the freedom that I have received for nothing? I have decided to use it to help people. So I jumped first into this challenge of starting A21 here in Greece. Of course, we did lots of research and we went to Cambodia and we saw great works. And we had experts here telling us that basically this is not a feasible thing to do in Greece. So we decided to do it anyway. And we started A21. There's this saying that goes that people who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are the ones who do it. I have found really that knowing what to do with what you know is the key to change. In other words, we need to be aware of something and we need to apply an action to that awareness. If we don't know a problem, what can we do about a problem? That's the first step. The second is, when it comes to action without awareness, that doesn't make a change. No one is going to thank you for being aware of their problem. We know that there's poverty in the world today, but many of us don't know what to do about it. Other than, of course, make sure we finish our plate of food. Make sure you finish your food. That's all we know, how to fight poverty. But when we understand what the problem is and we find a solution to that problem, then we can make a difference. I jumped into A21 and we started here. Within 2 months, we were able to open a home and invite the first survivors of trafficking into our care. It was crazy. It all happened within 4 months of even being on the ground here. We had no experience. We had no obvious experience to start this. We didn't know more than others. We just started. We jumped into it. I won't necessarily recommend that, but we did. And today, A21, just 6 years later, has spread across the world. It is in 10 different locations across 9 countries. We are assisting victims of trafficking every single day, helping to restore their lives and give them a new start. A21 has started 1109 here in Greece, which is a hotline that runs 24/7, 365 days a year. It has a translation service in 170 languages. You should save this number in your phone. If you ever see trafficking, you can always call this number. We're doing police training. We're training the police to identify victims of trafficking. We are doing prevention and awareness work in schools in most at-risk areas. We are doing court cases to represent the victims in court. And for example, Katja, which I was talking about before, came into our care, and we were able to support her in court to see her trafficker sentenced to 15 years in prison and a fine of over 100,000 euros. This is making a huge statement that human trafficking can be stopped. We are, in other words, turning a high-profit, low-risk crime into a low-profit and high-risk crime. Now, you might be sitting there thinking, what could I ever do about this? Or what could I do about the need that I'm aware of? I would ask you, what do you have in your hand? What do you have in your hand that you could use? What talents and gifts do you have? What connections do you have? What education do you have? What background do you have? That is what's going to make a difference. Your Ithaca is in your hands. The mark that you can leave on the world is your Ithaca. I have this amazing quote here from Einstein that says that the world is a dangerous place, not because of the evil that is happening, but because of those who look on and do nothing. In the time that I've done this TED Talk of 18 minutes, 36 people have just been trafficked. Of those 36, 21 has been trafficked into sex slavery, and the rest 14 trafficked into forced labor. Now you know. What will you do with what you know? Thank you.